Marvel's first family wasn't always known as a cosmically irradiated team who saves New York from Galactus or the Skrulls on a daily basis. They were once normal humans, and today on Chronologic Comics we're going to figure out exactly what happened to them. Our story begins with Susan Storm having tea with her friends, but all they're talking about is how they're getting married, and Susan, well, she's getting asked into outer space by her boyfriend, but she can't tell her friends that. And back at their home, the Baxter Building, Reed Richards, Susan's boyfriend, is working up something very special for her. But right now, Reed is getting chewed out by his assistant, who thinks he's just insane for making this space tourism program and even trying to think it's plausible to work. But Alyssa doesn't understand, that's only half of it. The tourism program Reed is doing is only to subsidize his autism research. So Alyssa pulls her last card, that if Reed does this without clearance, he'll be vilified, God, if not even arrested. But then she asks who just exactly the pilot is. When we cut to a rundown boxing gym in the Lower East End, where two old chaps are talking about Benjamin Grimm, a beast of a man who's just clobbering that punching bag. When all of a sudden the old men get on Ben's past, his former life, from being a college football star, then an Air Force soldier in the Army. The old men are just wondering, what does Ben need to train for now? But he's training because he's scared. Hell, Reed asked him to fly them into space. That's a lot to take in, but Ben's gut's telling him not to do it. But Reed's family, and they've been through everything together. So eventually, Ben meets up with Reed, explaining he can't really let Reed and Susie do this by themselves. But if he is gonna go on this mission, he does want another egghead on board in case something does go wrong. But instead, Ben gets Johnny Storm, Susan's younger brother, who just happens to be a mechanic. Well, kinda half mechanic and half model, and in the moment he's in a photo shoot. But it's really just more flirting with the photographer and making plans for a fun night before that life-changing ride to outer space. The next day, however, in the middle of Stockton, California, Reed prepares his spaceship launch from a barn silo right before the takeoff. Back at the Baxter Building, Alyssa notices Reed launched his shuttle at the same time NASA did just to be unnoticed. And as they take off, Johnny realized he may have partied way too hard last night, almost puking in his helmet, as he isn't trained for this like everyone else is. When everyone notices a ticking noise, but no one can determine its origin, until Reed sees a metronome of a cosmic storm just like Alyssa predicted. They're being bombarded by cosmic radiation, but Ben is trying everything in his power to divert the ship's course, but it just isn't working. And within seconds, Johnny lights on fire like he was just in a massive flame war. Reed stretches the control panel, making sure that their shields will hold. Susan's eyes start to white out, and then everything starts to white out. Ben falls on the control panel, starting to get heavy, and he just can't move. With Johnny and Ben incapacitated from the storm, and Susan watching as everyone she loves fall to the ground in pain, freaking out, before Reed even passes out, making contact with Alyssa, demanding she take control of the ship and bring them home. But they lose contact right before the ship crashes into upstate New York. Moments after the crash, Susan walks away unscathed, completely forgetting about her brother and searching for Reed. When she sees him, every bone and every limb twisted and broken, rotated and flipped, some even crushed underneath rocks, Susan runs over to her departed boyfriend. When Reed's head rotates, calling out to Susan, making her jump in horror, just thinking to herself, oh, don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. When Reed stretches back to his normal shape, noticing he can elastate his body out and back to form without harming himself. But Susan just doesn't understand how Reed isn't in mortal pain or freaking out, but as her feelings and emotions bottle up, she becomes see-through. And trying not to throw her into a shock, Reed hesitates to tell Susan that she's turned a slight shade of invisible. When Reed finally realizes it's the cosmic rays radiation that did this to them, which wasn't part of Alyssa's prediction. When suddenly Johnny comes running out of the woods screaming, making the fire stop. Oh God, please help him! Susan tries to run over and help her brother, but Reed stops her and tells Johnny to calm down, take a deep breath, and focus. He's not in pain or smells like burning flesh, so they come to the conclusion that Johnny isn't on fire, he just simply is fire. When finally the last member of the group comes back, Ben is now this huge, rocky, thing. and he's headed right for Reed out of control, blaming him for turning him into this freakier version of Frankenstein's monster. Grabbing a tree and swinging it at Reed, but Reed just expands around it, dodging Ben's attacks. While trying to explain that they are all changed like this, but Ben isn't seeing it because he's a giant monster. But Reed still tries to argue with his old friend, saying that they have to focus and control their powers. But Ben finally grabs Reed, screaming, "Do I look normal to you?" But finally Sue has had enough and screams for them to quit, unknowingly creating a force field in between Reed and the thing that used to be Ben, holding them down, not knowing what she's doing. When Alyssa finally arrives, having these fantastically forward-powered beings get in the hovercraft. And as they escape the area, she informs them that the government may think that they are infected with something while out in outer space. But later that night, back at the Baxter building, Reed informs the team that they're going to be under lockdown until Reed can figure something out about these powers they have. But Johnny protests as Ben has left the Baxter building hours ago, but Reed explains that they're all going to have to get tests done, including Ben whenever he returns, also informing them that this lockdown will take anywhere from a month or maybe a little bit longer. But that doesn't sit well with Johnny, so he sneaks out riding his motorcycle, angry through the night from being grounded like a child. So he starts going faster and faster, his adrenaline pumping as he starts to ignite, flames all around his body. His hair goes up in a blaze, and now he's just thinking, how fast can Johnny Storm 2.0 go? So he speeds up more and more, melting off his handlebars, igniting his whole body until the bike combusts underneath Johnny, until he's going so fast he can fly? Meanwhile, Ben is walking through the Lower East End of his old neighborhood, and all he can think about is being a monster in a coma, unable to wake up, when he sees Johnny flying through the sky. But back at the Baxter building, Alyssa is doing tests on Reed as his body is stretched all over the laboratory. But as Alyssa reviews Reed's results, she informs him that he's fine. However, Johnny may be a fuel source for his own fire and eventually burn himself out. And Ben, well, if his mutation keeps up, he may become a motionless statue. And speaking of Sue, she wouldn't even let Alyssa give her a physical, as Alyssa says Sue feels threatened by her. But Sue doesn't need to be jealous, as now Reed, Sue, Ben, and Johnny are all bound by life. She also informs Reed if he wants to make life a lot easier, he can tell his girlfriend that she's just here strictly for science. And the 4 book deals that all this is eventually going to spawn. As Reed thanks her for all her help, Susan is outside, testing her invisibility, eavesdropping on their whole conversation. But now she has to work on force fields. And getting dressed. The next day, however, Alyssa is watching the news as she's getting dressed for work, as the reporter is talking about the earth tremors on the new subway station's tunnel construction, with a homeless man spouting that he's seen alligators in the sewer, blood cults, even circus freaks. But this is like a Godzilla monster, but freakier. While at the Baxter building, everyone is just waking up, with Reed apologizing to Ben, again trying to search for a cure. When Johnny barges in screaming he doesn't want to be cured, he can fly, and he spent all night practicing. But more importantly, Johnny wants another physical from Alyssa. When speak of the devil, Alyssa appears on a hologram to tell Reed and the gang that there's a monster raging through Midtown, and Reed thinks that, with all their powers, they might be able to save some lives. So the team suits up in matching cargo pants and blue shirts, getting ready for takeoff, with Ben and Johnny getting in the hovercraft when Reed turns to Sue, asking her to sit this one out as they don't yet know the full extent of her powers and he doesn't want her to get hurt. But that just makes Sue angry. Why did they all get to risk their lives? But it takes the monstrous Ben to tell Susie just to sit this one out, and she listens. But not long after leaving the Baxter building, they see it, the giant reptilian beast streaks away. But Ben just plans to jump out and smash it from the air, but Reed thinks of a better plan of attack, telling Johnny to jump out, distracting the beast like a Human Torch would. So Johnny jumps out of the hovercraft thinking to himself, Human Torch, I like the sound of that. Back at the Baxter building, Susan finds Alyssa at a computer screen relaying information to Reed. When Susan asks why she isn't out there helping, and plainly said Alyssa doesn't want to die. However, if Susan feels left out, there is another hovercraft in the hangar. Back with Johnny as he's flying around looking at this giant beast, all he can remember is the Godzilla movies he used to watch with his dad, thinking about all the monster names. Mothra? No. Gigan? No. Megalon? Definitely not. Ghidorah? No. Gratu, and the monster looks at him. Here, Gratu. Johnny flies around pissing off the monster, while on the ground people are running away from Ben as he's trying to get them out of the way of the battle. But people run around screaming, thinking that Ben is the monster's baby as he holds up the monster's foot before it crushes a woman who's scared of both things right now. And with Reed stretched out, pointing away from the battle as people run away from him, but a construction worker runs up to him freaked out, asking why the monster is attacking, and why he's all stretchy. None of this makes any sense. Once Susan joins the battle, though, she finds the Mole Man, the one behind this attack on the surface world, as he claims Korgu, his monster, is his only but first of many to attack the surface world. As he walks through the streets, he's mad at the surface world societies, digging into his dwellings and caverns, destroying their homes. So now he shall destroy their homes and skyscrapers, starting with the Baxter Building. When Sue approaches the Mole Man and asking if they can stop and talk peacefully for a moment, but the Mole Man doesn't understand why Susan, a being so nice and so beautiful, would talk to him, a revolting man. But Susan over the last few weeks has seen a lot. Her boyfriend turned into a stretchy monster, her brother turned into a human torch, one of her oldest friends turned into a rock monster. And frankly, Susan just isn't shallow anymore, and asks the Mole Man his real name, with him replying Harvey Elders. Back overhead with Johnny flying around, not really paying attention, Korgu slams him into a water tower, completely dousing his fire. Thinking quick, Reed wraps around the monster's feet, trying to keep him in place, while Ben smashes his foot, making the monster fall. But Susan has to react quick too, as she runs over, trying to tell them she has made a peaceful solution, when the monster starts to fall towards Susan as she faints. But when she awakes to her loving boyfriend Reed, he just has to tell her force field powers are stronger than they ever anticipated, as she's holding up Korgu with no problem at all. And with that, once Korgu's back on his feet, Harvey simply tells him to go heal and sit in Central Park. And in the aftermath, Johnny's more shocked at the monster's name, and it was taken down by the word heal. Reed walks over to Dr. Elders, whom he used to be a student of, offering him a drink and comforting resolution of this whole mess. Reed invites Harvey to live with them in the Baxter Building's basement, after modifications on his requirements are met, of course. Once all 4 team members are back together, they get ambushed by Jillian Jones for an on-the-spot interview. So, Susan introduces Reed, herself, and Johnny. When Johnny tries to advertise www.hottiesonfire.com. But all Jillian can ask about is Ben, and what exactly they can call him, cause she doesn't really know. He's kind of just a thing. When Johnny burst out, that's exactly it. That's his code name. We're a team. With Reed trying to explain, but Johnny bursts in again. We're the Fearsome Four, taking on the Galaxy's scum. Watching from the Baxter Building, Alyssa can already see this as a train wreck just waiting to happen. But she hopes Reed just rolls with it. But Alyssa is not the only one watching the news broadcast. It's also the ruler of Latveria. Later at the Baxter Building, watching the news broadcast they were all just in, one of the casters compares this superhero group to the Marvel Age of Captain America. But Ben is furious as they're all painted as monsters because Johnny spoke up and called them the Fearsome Four. I mean, there's so many other words that begin with the letter F. Meanwhile, Susan walks in on Reed performing an experiment expanding his brain. But it really doesn't do much other than look really, really weird. Anyway, Reed apologizes for misjudging Susan's use in the field, even pointing out that she's the most powerful out of all 4 of them. And then Reed shows Susan all the plans and designs he's been working on. And then turning to Susan, asking her if she wants to be the first member on his new team. But all Susan can do is laugh, asking Reed if he really thinks she's the strongest out of all of them. And all Reed can do is reply is, yeah, but only if I can be the smartest. And with one costume change later, the new team is born, with all 4 members wearing matching in design but still unique suits for each individual. Reed's suit can stretch to any shape he wants with his body. Susan's amplifies her abilities and invisibility. Johnny's suit allows him to burn without burning through his suit and clothes. And Ben's suit, well, Ben has a top and shorts from the very, very big and tall store. Except Ben isn't really for the shirt, so he just rocks the shorts instead. But as Reed explains how that a test group didn't really like Fearsome Four, so they're gonna go with Fantastic Four instead. When Alyssa comes by to do a team overview before they do the press conference, and everyone's wondering what press conference. But Alyssa skips that, just going over the team names, with Susan as the Invisible Woman as, well, she can turn invisible. Ben's previously marketed The Thing was very positive, so they're gonna stick with that. Alyssa also points out Johnny's likeness to the original android Human Torch, but he never knew there was one before him. And then all four of them walk out on the stage for their big debut. Mr. Fantastic, the Invisible Woman, the Human Torch, and The Thing. Together, they're the Fantastic Four! But in the midst of their celebration of peace with the Mole Man in New York, a scruffy man in the crowd notices the Human Torch and can't believe that his greatest nemesis is actually alive. This nameless man walks over to the coast, staring blankly into the waves crashing up against the docks. When his friends come by asking if he's finally snapped and is gonna jump, but he just declares he is Namor, the Prince of Atlantis, the Submariner, and simply jumps into the ocean. After the press conference, returning to the Baxter building, Ben joins Reed and Alyssa in the lab. And Reed explains to Ben, with the help from Dr. Elders, long story short, explains that they can actually change Ben back to normal with some of the cosmic radiation. But right away, Ben protests he isn't returning to space as he turned into this last time he went up there. When Reed finally shows him the storm chamber, which will recreate the cosmic storm, explaining once they crash, the ship held onto the cosmic radiation, and that with this machine they can draw the radiation from the ship's pieces to re-expose Ben to the radiation. But again, he asks and protests what will really happen to him, and all Dr. Elders can say is he may become a tiger, or even worse, a woman. So Ben, deciding he has nothing left to lose, just walks straight on in and says, "Crank it up, baby!" Back in the ocean, Namor reaches what used to be Atlantis. But he is furious that his home is gone and destroyed, so he rockets back to the surface and grabs the closest filthy monkey he can find. Namor demands to know where all of Atlantis' treasures have gone. In a panic, all the man says is he knows a lot of artifacts from the ocean have gone to the Natural Museum. And with that, Namor takes off. Walking straight through the museum, everyone stops to look at the half-naked man with wings on his feet. When he finally finds the Horn of Proteus, he breaks it out of his glass prison and simply leaves the museum. Meanwhile, Johnny is hitting on his photographer Zoe on top of the Statue of Liberty's torch. But Zoe thought Johnny would want a more Mile High Club sort of thing up here instead of talking about business. And Susan alerts Johnny to the man in the underwear who robbed the museum earlier. As Johnny flies through Manhattan, he asks if the Great Wall of China or Stretch Armstrong are coming, but Sue informs Johnny that they're doing more tests. And speaking of that, the cosmic radiation chamber is done, with Reed opening the machine doors, worried for his friend. He sees Ben Grimm. He's human again. But Alyssa and Reed want to do more tests. When Alyssa gets the notification about the Submariner, Susan and Johnny are encountering Namor. Namor proclaims keeping Susan alive for his bride, and making an example of his old nemesis by drowning the torch, grabbing Johnny by the neck, rocketing towards the tides below. But before impact on the water, Susan creates a force field to protect Johnny from the water below. And then he goes supernova, filling the bubble with volcanic-like heat. But not too long after he does go supernova, all the oxygen inside Susan's force field burns off, revealing a beardless Namor. Holding Johnny by the throat, Susan screams for Namor to release her brother. And with that, he is enraged, jumping through her fantastic car, destroying it. Which sends Reed a notification about Susan's car being destroyed as he rushes to their location. Back at the Baxter building, Alyssa's gathering all the information they have on Namor from history, books, or anything they can gather. But it's just too late, as Reed sees it out there on the far reaches of the ocean. The Leviathan surfacing. So now Reed has to think up a quick plan on how to defeat Namor and the Leviathan. And this whole time, Ben is with Alyssa at the Baxter building, watching his friends get defeated by this maniac. Till he finally decides to go back into the cosmic radiation chamber. But Alyssa protests she won't turn it back on. It could kill Ben, or worse. So Ben does the only thing he can. He turns to the Mole Man, asking him if he can do it, even if it'll kill him. And simply the Mole Man agrees, because he just doesn't want to live in a world covered by water. When Reed finally reaches Namor, he takes a page out of Susan's book trying to talk him down, asking what has happened to Susan and Johnny. And Namor smirks at Reed, replying with, "He killed them." Making Reed go ballistic, stretching out, wrapping all around Namor, trying to choke him, screaming he would resolve this peacefully. But now he's out for blood. Reed wants him dead, but Susan appears with Johnny on invisible platforms, pulling them apart with her telekinesis and holding Namor imprisoned, explaining she doesn't know if she can or can't make a bubble in his throat and expand it. But she can always try. Reed calls her off as they need him to call off the Leviathan, but right away Namor says he won't and he can't, as he lost the trumpet that awoke the beast in the first place. And with that, Susan makes the trumpet visible again, and explains she found it getting herself and Johnny out of the water. So Reed takes the trumpet and Namor with them, but Namor explains the Leviathan is already destroying Battery Park. When out of nowhere, Ben Grimm is the Thing again, riding Korgu like a Pacific Rim kaiju fight, yelling it's clobbering time, with both creatures crashing heads and the Thing getting thrown around the beast's head, slapped by the Leviathan, leaving Ben's new old rocky body dented and crumbling. With Jillian Jones doing a news coverage on his monster on monster fight, when Johnny comes flying in with the trumpet to the rescue, screaming, "Hey Ben, Reed said you were human again, but Alyssa said you weren't, so I'm super confused, but can you do me a favor and get out of there? I'm gonna try something." Flying by, blowing the trumpet, and since the Leviathan is compelled to answer, Johnny keeps blowing it, drawing the beast back out to sea until it swims to the depths of the ocean, where it'll hibernate once again. Back at the Baxter Building once more, Namor is imprisoned until the Fantastic Four can find Atlantis and its people and punish Namor properly for his crimes. When Ben butts in to say that turning back into the Thing was his decision, but Reed can't believe that Ben did this, so now he's gonna try even harder and recreate the experiment to fix Ben again. But the big guy just shrugs it off, cause now this is bigger than him. This is destiny, and one day, yeah, Ben will want to be human again, but not today. And right then, Johnny and Susan enter the lab. And right there, they all know everything from here on out will be a journey of mind, body, heart, and soul. And with that, the Fantastic Four is truly born.